What's that? What?
Oh, excuse me. My producer's telling me I'm holding the slate the wrong way. This is not supposed to be infinity. We're really talking about chapter 8. Take 2. Okay, thank you. By the magic of imagination and your willing suspension of disbelief, I have come here from the future. I know you're a lot more curious about the future than in the present. Yet, that is where my interest lies. The past, which is your present. Sounds very confusing, doesn't it? Okay, well, it all began with these journal entries that I took over from Harrison. Harrison was my mentor when I was a child living off Biscayne Bay in Miami. Well, what was then known as Miami. I started writing, picking up where he left off from what had become known as the Harrison Chronicles, and started writing my own journal entries, which became known as Captain's Logs. You've heard of that before. Remember that old TV series, Star Trek? They used to start out with Captain Kirk saying, Captain's Log, so-and-so and so, star date, so-and-so and so-and-so. So I took to writing my own Captain's Log. There are such things as Captain's Logs, by the way. And one that we're going to talk about today is the Captain's Log noted as 20-0008 that I wrote at the Hermitage Lagoon. It was a Wednesday, that particular day. The reason that I'm picked this one to read to you today is because of this idea of you being so interested in the future, what's going to happen in the future, whereas I am so interested, as you can tell from the journal entries that are collected in this book called 2020. I am focused very much on the past. Now I do talk about the future. I am, after all, making journal entries in the future, but those entries quickly turn to my thoughts about what happened in the past, or what is for me in the future of the past, which is for you, depending on when you're watching this, the present, or maybe even the near future. What do I mean by that? Well, the year 2020 was a pivotal year, not because of what happened on any particular day, like today, for example. I'm told, I'm asking my producer, okay, it's beginning of March of 2020. Today is it really that much different than yesterday? Is it going to be that much different tomorrow than it is today? And so time goes moment by moment, second by second, day by day, year by year. Is there really any difference from one day to the next? Maybe there is, but the changes are so slight, so minuscule, that you don't really notice them that much. And so when you project into the future and you say, what are things going to be like then? Or if you look to the past and you say, oh, that was the way things were back then. Were they really so much different then as they are now? Yeah, sure they are, you're thinking to yourself. Depending on when you're watching this, maybe 50 years in the past, technology was different, people dressed differently, people maybe behaved differently in certain ways, but fundamentally, was it really that much different then as now? I can tell you from the future, looking back at the past, going beyond the 2020s, things were the same. They were the same as they are now, as they are then, in so many different ways. However, there came a time during the 2020s when we reached what Harrison called a tipping point, and things started to change. We didn't notice it at the time, and here I am in 2020 talking to you about things that are happening now, but they happened before, and they will happen again. But looking back on it, as they say, hindsight is 2020. We of the future realize that we had reached a turning point. We had reached a tipping point, as they said back in the 2020s, when the environment started to turn on us. When Mother Nature started to take her revenge, it seemed. When things changed, there was a definite difference between what had gone before and what was about to happen in the future. There was a book written in 1948 by a man by the name of George Orwell. I have his book. It's a book that the book 1984 by itself was in Harrison's study. I have it over here. This is a collection of Orwell stories. 1984, I think it's actually a novella. It's not really a novel per se, but it's in this book along with Animal Farm in 1984. You'll see 1984 probably being his best known work. Like I said, it was written in 1948, and the theory is, or the rumor is, that he just transposed the digits, the last two digits. Instead of 1948, he just switched it to 1984. Maybe that was kind of a joke of his. He was presenting the present in the form of a story about what the future would be like, and the future being the same as it was in the present. So, was 1984 predictive, or more likely descriptive? He was describing things as they were then, but just putting it in a different setting, imagining some technology that would exist in the future, but put to the same use by humans then as now. Okay, chapter 8 of this book. The entries that were made then. The story at this point describes what happened with my mom and my kid sister, Kate. She later became known as White Feather, but at this time she was still my little kid sister, Kate. And what happens in this scene is Mother's Day. The title to this chapter. Doesn't really. This book doesn't actually have titles, title names for each chapter, but this one could be called Mother's Day, if it did have a name. So in this scene, let me try to set it up for you a little bit. We're having Mother's Day. My mom, at the time, was working 3 jobs, trying to make ends meet. Depending on where you are, what station in life you are, and when you're watching this this video, you would think things in the 2020s were great. The economy was soaring. Unemployment was low. There were good times had by all. But in reality, for my mom and for us, our small family, you had my mom working 2, 3 jobs, trying to make ends meet. It was very difficult at that time, and it was true for a lot of people. There were certainly a lot of people that were doing quite well. They were very comfortable. They were enjoying the way things were working out for them in the 2020s economically. But for the vast majority of people, that wasn't really true. Sure, unemployment was low, but here she was. Yeah, she was not unemployed. It's just that she was working for slave wages, basically, struggling to support her household. And that was true of a lot of people, at least in the beginning of 2020. So let me continue setting the scene here. We're having Mother's Day. She's exhausted. We surprise her. We had presents for her, and I was making her favorite, an omelet for breakfast. And it was just a way of showing that we appreciated her, and we also knew, my sister and I, that she worked real hard. But what happens in Mother's Day, she gets up, she's freaking out, because she said, "Oh my God, look at all this stuff you guys prepared for me. We can't afford this." And I don't want to spoil it by telling you too much about why it was that we were able to afford what we were doing. And because the point of the story is that we showed our mom our appreciation for her, and also gave her gifts. My kid's sister was, with the help of her new friend and a mentor in her own right, Calusa, presented our mom with a card, a handwritten card with stick figures on it, you know how kids are, and also a carving that was premised on some sculptures that were done by indigenous tribes to the west. Here's this isn't the carving itself, but this is a version of the type of sculptures that I am talking about, and that you'll read about in the book if you haven't already. My sister gives my mom that curious gift. It's actually apropos. It's a version of a indigenous person with how they carried their child, presumably. Me, on the other hand, what was my gift? Being the nerdy geek kind of person that I was, and still am really, I gave my mom a book. Go figure. I was a stupid kid. I didn't know. I didn't know any better. I loved books. I still do. And sometimes I'm trying to give a book that is appropriate, at least one that I enjoyed and I thought was very, very thoughtful. And the book that I gave her was 1984, that I borrowed from Harrison's library. So here we are. It's in the 2020s, we're having Mother's Day, and here is a young boy, I was a young boy at the time, giving my mom a book for Mother's Day. And so I'm going to take it from there and just read to you what happened. Here, I got something for you, too. I slid into a chair next to my mom with the book I had in my hand. It was another loaner from Harrison. I gave it to her. What's this? A book? I hardly have time to read, but maybe I can find time today to read it. It has been a while since I took time to just sit back, relax, and read a book. What kind of book is it? She probably wanted to know why I would give her a book to begin with, and why I thought she should read this particular one. It's called 1984. This is the famous book by George Orwell. You know, how they sometimes say something is very Orwellian. That's where that saying came from. Thank you for the literary lesson, my son. I do seem to recall learning about Orwell and his book about the future. I did take some college courses, you know. I never did read the book itself, so now I can catch up with what all the fuss was about, I suppose. I think you might like it, but my teacher said the book was written in 1948. Orwell switched the last two digits and called the book 1984, sort of as a joke. I didn't dare tell her that my teacher was the hermit she was so suspicious of. What do you mean? The way it was explained to me is that while the story in the book was about a world in the future where all these Orwellian things were happening, the book really told the story of what was happening right then when he wrote it in the present. Don't spoil the ending, but what sort of Orwellian things were happening in 1948 that were predicted to happen in 1984? And did those things come true? I don't recall the world coming to an end in 1984. That was over 35 years ago, and we are still here. My teacher says 1984, the book, not the year, is about a world that is destructive to a free and open society, where there is brutal and draconian control using propaganda, misinformation, and doublethink, which is when the society is brainwashed into denying what the truth really is. They even have what they call unpersons, people whose past existence is erased from public records. The memory of them disappears. I don't seem to recall any of that happening in 1984, and I wasn't around in 1948 to be able to say one way or the other. But it sounds like a very interesting story. I like science fiction, and that sounds like what this book is. I am sure I will enjoy it. She set the book aside and smiled at me sweetly. My mom did that. I love it when she did that. I decided not to try to convince her that the book was really about things that happened in the 1940s, the 1980s, or in the present, today, any day, that a person just happened to be reading 1984. Or, I might add, a book like this, 2020. How would a person brainwashed into thinking that reality wasn't really real be able to tell if the things depicted in the book, like doublethink, existed now or in the past? I doubt she actually ever read the book. A few weeks later, I found it on the bottom shelf of the bookcase at our house. I returned it to the library in the study. Well, how did you like it? Harrison asked. I thought it was great. I gave it to my mom to read. And? She didn't get the ending. So concludes Chapter 8 in that entry. I hope that that makes a little more sense about what I'm talking about. In the present, the future, the past, it all kind of melds together. But there's a reason that I'm so focused on 2020, the 2020s, in looking in the past, because you see, depending on when you actually watch this, scientists have either told you or are about to reveal to you that after careful study and looking at the geological record and other evidence, they have determined that we now exist in something called the Anthropocene. It's a epoch, I guess you would call it, or epoch, whatever. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's a geological era. It's called Anthropocene because the human race has so influenced our geology, our ecosystems, our our ecology, to the point where we have warped it, we have influenced it, we have changed it, and there's been a shift. We have been able, through our technology, to affect things like climate change, and in so doing, we have altered the course of nature, the way things work, in various different ways. When did the Anthropocene begin? They're going to tell you when they estimate that this started, but you can bet your bottom dollar that it occurred right around the time of the Industrial Revolution. Really, it was maybe before that. You can't really say with precision, just like the year 2020 is when it all happened, or year 1984, or the year 1948, or maybe 1492. Was that the year when things started to shift in the not so good way, and we started to destroy the planet that we live on? But the question then becomes not so much what is going to happen in the future, but what is happening now. These are things that are happening to you, and there's I'm sorry to say, there's really nothing you can do about it. It's coming. As they say, or as we used to say in the village, the water is coming. The water is coming, the storms are coming, and maybe the Industrial Revolution has come to an end and we're shifting into something else. But I don't want to spoil that for you either. Okay, so my producer said that I was holding it wrong when we started, but maybe I wasn't after all, because are we talking about this, number 8, or are we talking about infinity? It's a question of timing. What day is it? What difference does it make? So, if you're interested in learning more, you can go to the website. Here's the website, 2020, thebook-thebook.com. You gotta do it exactly like that. For some reason 2020 was already taken, so I don't have that one. If you go to the website, in the upper right corner you can click and you'll be able to access the book. This website offers the book at a discount. Guess how much? $20.20. It's a great price for a book like this. You can also get lots of information from the website, including things about 1984, George Orwell, which you'll be able to access by browsing around in the website and finding the entries concerning Chapter 8. And you should be able to access this message as well as other information there. There is a lot of references in the book to many different things, not just George Orwell, but many other things that Harrison taught to me, and that I think that you will find equally interesting. Thank you very much for watching this video. Again, go to this website to find out more and to order your copy of 2020.